this great party, the Free National Movement. I was afforded the opportunity to serve in the cabinet of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas in the capacity of Minister of Financial Services, Trade and Industry, and Immigration. And so, Mr. Speaker, I rise today to give the Bahamian people a report on the ministry thus far. But first, Mr. Speaker, I crave your indulgence just to make short mention of my activities in the Yamacraw constituency. Mr. Speaker, we have continued to work in the Yamacraw constituency in a transparent, honest, and enterprising way. Through the use of the monthly grant that is given by the government of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, we are able to keep our headquarters open every day between the hours of 10 to 5, and on Mondays today, we extend those hours where I would sit and meet with constituents between the hours of 6 and 8. And even though, Mr. Speaker, we have prescribed a certain hours to sit and have chats with our community, obviously, you know that through experience that goes over. Mr. Speaker, we've also been very active in the community, and I've heard messages over a particular radio program, which I will not mention, indicating that the member for Yamacraw has gone missing, and nothing could be further from the truth. What? Mr. Speaker, I can tell you that from the first week or the first month when we were successful in the election, we organized, I spoke with the Minister of Works, and I want to extend profound gratitude to him for the level of service that he's given to the Bahamian people through the Ministry of Works. And we met with one of the directors, where we had inspectors come into the community. And before we even did that, we communicated with the constituents to find out what were the infrastructural needs. And so drainage, we identified where we had drainage problems, and they've gone in and they've rectified some of those problems. They're ongoing. Speed bumps, I do recall on Commonwealth Boulevard, persons would always lose control of their vehicles just by the bend by Booker and destroy a wall that's there by a lady. So we had speed bumps. We had the entire community assess the speed bumps. So we started that process, and we're going through that. Lighting, I know that many persons have complained about lighting in the constituency of Yamacraw. We've communicated with DPL, and I want to say, I put it on our chat group, that there is a structured, strategic process for ongoing repair of lighting across the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, and especially New Providence. And so that matter is being addressed. We've also done remarkably well with the refurbishment of our parks. And what we've done is we've taken a patriotic mode to it, where we've painted large Bahamian flags. We've cleaned the parks up. As a matter of fact, we celebrate the fact that we have one of the largest outdoor farming projects in Nassau, which incorporates a nature trail. And at this point, we're in conversations with the National Trust. They're looking at it to see how they can assist us with the trees that we plant in there and the vegetation, and perhaps looking toward adopting. But we're not going to allow a full adoption of the park. We've also kept up with our school programs, our back-to-school programs. We've been able to raise some $23,000, Mr. Speaker. And we're focusing on discipline, dedication, drive, and determination. So we established in the Eastern Community Rising Star Band. We've been in contact with the All-Star Band that will be our mentor. And so we're inviting persons on the 29th of this month to send their children out and to become a part of the band. All we say is we want the participation of the parents, and we're not there to hurt your children, but discipline is required. We've continued our town meetings, Mr. Speaker, and very shortly we will hold another one looking at the rights of saying that senior citizens have rights also. That leads me to the naming of a park in Yamacraw. the Peggy Phillip Park. That will be done on the 22nd of February, where we will honor Ms. Phillip for the work that she has done in the community to help to assist in building the Yamacraw community, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, that's just a few of the things that we've been doing. We've been in contact with all of the associations, including the ECA that just lost a giant of a man in Mr. Spencer, the Elizabeth Estate Community Association, and any number of associations. And I want to say that we understand their concerns. We've been doing walkabouts. Uh, we've been meeting with the persons in the community, and we're doing our work. And do not listen to the lies that are being told. One thing I know about myself, and as long as I'm in this thing called politics, that I will preserve my dignity and my integrity. And what I said that I will do, I will continue to do, and that is to be forever present in the community. One of the significant things that we have done, Mr. Speaker, we've been meeting with persons over the past couple months, and I would advise every member of parliament to do the same. And we know that there are persons who may be in search of jobs. And when I get to the speaking to the Department of Immigration, as a part of the ministry that's been assigned to me, I will speak to that. But we've taken that information, cataloged those persons who say they're in search of a job. We've gotten their resumes, and what we're intending to do is to send all of that information to the department, to the Labor Department, so that when persons apply for work permits, we can say there's a competent, efficient, and honest Bahamian who is able to do this job. And I want to say to members of the Yamacraw community and to persons around the Bahamas, get your resume together, send them into the Department of Immigration. So that when you give the department a call through our hotline, as we've been getting recently, for instance, I spoke with, he's sitting right next to me, Mr. Albury, somebody who came into the Abacos, doing work that Bahamians could very well do. When we get cogent, factual information or evidence that a Bahamian could properly do a job, we then search our system, and if it's necessary that we cancel out that work permit, we do that so the Bahamians can get. But you have to be able to do the work. You have to be able to do the work at the standard. And once we can prove that you're able to do that, we will assist. More than just that, we will also enforce the national policy, Mr. Speaker, that where a Bahamian is unable to do a job, that there is created the environment for transfer of expertise and or knowledge. So I want to say to all of the persons who have been working extremely hard with me, especially my executive association, we just had a soiree where we invited them out and celebrated the fact, their commitment and their loyalty. And we had Lassido and the boys, who we term as celebrities in the community. They came through and they played some music for us. So that is Yamacraw, Mr. Speaker, and we will continue to do that. We understand that there is an edifice. I've spoken to the minister. I've spoken to the member for St. Anne's. He's been on it for some time. An edifice that does not meet building codes or building standards that is now causing serious concerns in the community, and that is the old Stokes house. Just recently, we know that a young girl met her demise at the rear of that facility. Mr. Speaker, it's an eyesore. It attracts persons undesirables. And so we're going to work closely with the Minister of Work. But I respectfully put him on guard that we are in the process of drafting our own document to take to the Supreme Court to say to the Supreme Court that it does not meet the standards and is not in the best interest of the community, and that structure should be removed. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And I now go on to my portfolio, the Ministry of Financial Services, Trade and Industry. Mr. Speaker, we are now in the throes, and no matter what anybody says, and I'm going to speak to some of the travel opportunities that I've had, I want to thank the Bahamian people for those opportunities. Uh, we are now in the throes of an environmental crisis, whether we like it or not. Sperm whales are turning up on our beaches, filled with plastic. And the UN and all of the international organizations says that we must do something about it, or we risk losing very important species. Not only that, Mr. Speaker, much more closer to home, we are in a climate crisis. And when I went to Kenya, Mr. Speaker, at the expense of the Bahamian people, that's all we were discussing. Because at that time in Kenya, they were experiencing enormous amounts of rain. Well, now they have locusts, where rivers were bursting their banks. And they couldn't understand it. It was raining in places where they never expected. Venice was underwater. We spoke about the Bahamas. Australia was on fire. And everybody was talking about the climate crisis. But one of the first places that was on the front burner was the Bahamas. And Mia Motley, the Prime Minister of Barbados, spoke about the climate crisis. And nobody in this house should ever say climate change anymore. We're in the middle of a climate crisis. The polar caps are melting at an alarming rate. In the next 100 years and shorter, if we do not, and they're very concerned as to whether or not we can turn it around. Some of the islands that we know will be no more. Some of these islands will be no more, Mr. Speaker. And so we have to be on the front lines, Mr. Speaker, in dealing with this situation. So, Mr. Speaker, I say that to say this, and I hear Andros, South and Central Andros. And I'm happy that he said something. Earlier today, he said he didn't want anybody to call his name. And so, yes. And so when he said, I don't want anybody to call his name, and I spoke to the member for Cat Island, I said, this is above him. Don't hold it against him. I love and respect a lady that's near and dear to him. And I hold him high. And she didn't tell me to say this. But they say to ask where he will be in 2022. He reminds me sometimes what my aunt says. You never know if a boat could take sea unless it go out. He's a man with sea legs. He don't get scared and jump off when the big waves come. He's proven himself.
He's a senior man.
He's a senior man. But when I spoke to, yes, when I spoke to Cat Island, my good cousin told me, says, he has nothing to worry about. He's tested and tried. You don't have a problem with me calling your name, South Andres? I don't think so. Don't say anything. Don't you say anything. Very good. But indeed, both of us, even though we may not deserve it. Don't mind everybody saying that's being honest. Don't mind everybody. Yeah, everybody saying they're safe in the arms of God. We don't deserve it, Mr. Speaker, but he still holds us near and dear. But I say that with all seriousness, Mr. Speaker, that we are in the throes of a climate crisis. Dorian freaked the environmentalists out. Never before seen. I went to, and everybody who haven't gone to Freeport, you should go. When you look at the pine trees, some 15 feet up, you see all the bark tops that are torn off the trees. That's where the water was. That's where the debris was, and you're inland. You need to go and see it. You need to see the big tree trunk that's in the roof. And then you cannot imagine, even though we've gone through it, we heard Mike, Minister Pintard and others sending us voice notes. And we experienced some of the horror. You had to be there to go through that and understand and appreciate what our brothers and sisters would have experienced. And it would be remiss of me, Mr. Speaker, and I know I only have 30 minutes. This is important. And I'm gonna go through everything that I have to say, Mr. Speaker. But I want to thank the international community who came forward. For those on the opposite side, I saw Exuma riding the boat. And he says, you know, the prime minister is working, even though he denies it now. He says, I'm working. Everybody must get to work. And Mr. Speaker, I say that to say this. Yes, it was in the paper. I saw your pictures. You were going on the helicopter. Don't deny it. So, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, I say this to say, we're still in a state of emergency. We may be able to go to sleep in Nassau or other islands, but Abaco and Freeport is still in a state of emergency. They're still described as disaster zones. So as we eat in the night, as we go to bed in the night, we must remember that. And so, Mr. Speaker, I now go to the Department of Immigration. Mr. Speaker, that institution that is responsible for immigration and immigration to the Bahamas. And the ideology, the philosophy, and the law is that this constitutional or sovereign and democratic country only wants fit and proper persons who are in the best interest of the peace, order, and good governance of this country. We welcome all to come, but there's a process by which you should come. And Mr. Speaker, when we think about immigration, normally we would think about it, and I'm going to go and tell you what we're doing in immigration and come out very quickly. We only think sometimes of economic migrants. But when you have economic migrants, Mr. Speaker, we are always to go in the protection mode because they're vulnerable. They don't have the necessary money. They don't have the necessary protection. They're women and they're children. And I was going to quote from the homily by His Grace Archbishop Patrick Pinder when he looked at the situation of the economic migrants during the Red Mass, Mr. Speaker. And Archbishop Pinder, I'm going to quote a portion from him, and I think it's very important to contextualize what I want to say. He says, we find ourselves in a nation where many migrants, many of them undocumented, come to our shores. In 2003, the bishops of Mexico and the United States reflected on a similar reality between the two nations. They prepared a document entitled, Strangers No Longer Together on the Journey of Hope. There they listed 5 main points, which may be helpful to us as we seek to work out a way through the most enduring social problem. And he quotes the 5. He says, persons have a right to find opportunities in their own homeland. And I'll speak to that. And then he says, number 2, persons have a right to migrate to support themselves and their families. 3, sovereign nations have the right to control their borders. 4, refugee and asylum seekers should be afforded protection. And 5, human dignity and human rights of undocumented migrants should be respected. And Mr. Speaker, I read that to say this, that the Department of Immigration fully appreciates that migrants have rights, and even though we find them in the Bahamas and we understand that they would have to go back, we're going to respect the dignity of the human person. And not only the dignity of the human person, you have to respect the dignity of a country to self-determine and survive. You have to respect the dignity of a democratic and sovereign country to self-determine and survive. And so, as we sit to discuss the budget, we've already prepared for how many students can be in our schools. We're already prepared for how many persons our doctors can serve. We already know the capacity with which our military can respond. And so when we say to persons, if you want to come and you want to bring your children, we have no more space in our school, tell me where you're going to educate your children. We're not being mean. We're not being hateful. When we say this is how you get rid of your refuge or this is how you build, it's not that we're being spiteful. We still would protect the dignity and integrity of the human person. I thought I'd just spend some time on that, Mr. Speaker. The Immigration Department is also concerned about terrorism financing, and this will go into other parts of my short presentation, money launderers, the gun traffickers, the human traffickers, and we know that that may be something that is in the air right now, and we're taking a serious note on that. As a matter of fact, I spoke to the trafficking group that is existent in the Bahamas, and I didn't tell them. Sometimes people say they want to come and see me. I say you all need to come and see me because I know that the interception of persons who are being trafficked is on the rise, and we are a tier 1 country. And we're going to do our best to protect women, children, and men as they come to the Bahamas. And so, Mr. Speaker, in the Immigration Department, we're now focusing on the full digitization. I want to commend my predecessors for the work that they've done, the digitization of the department. We find that in digitizing and working with the other law enforcement agencies, that we are finding people with dead persons' birth certificates. We are, and I can't comment on some matters because they're now before the courts. We know that people take pictures in the graveyard. I want to thank and commend Sally Ann Lockhart and her team at the Registrar General's Department. As we digitize, I spoke with a gentleman, he said in 8 months we can scan in all the files. Because we have the belief, when we know that identity theft is a serious problem in our country. So we're looking at this whole phenomenon of identity theft. As I told the persons as they were being sworn in the other day, if we find that you've stole the identity of anybody, we're going to revoke it. I think it's most important that I say at this time before I go on that there's a certain level socio-political activity that is only reserved for citizens. In the name of Jesus, if you're not a citizen, don't try to vote. If you're not a citizen, don't get involved in our political economy. That's reserved. Yeah, Angliston get up and she's vigorous. She's a Bahamian. She can do that. She can do that. She has a right to do that. She's earned that right. You know how she's earned that right, as I told them? She has the commitment, the loyalty, and the patriotism to serve this country. And I always say to them as we swear them, and you've said your prayers and you've given your commitment to your God. If you don't live up to what your God says, you know what happens. But when you take this oath and you do this pledge and you sing this national anthem, you've given your loyalty and your commitment to your country. And if you don't live up to that and you commit treason, you deserve to die and to be planted in an unmarked grave. And we should not be ashamed. We should not be ashamed, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we should not, see, when you see people, and I know this is not popular, and I have to check my time. No, we talk every day, and he always tells me about Bahamianization. You don't know him very well, because if that's the type of commitment this country requires, we have young police officers and young defense force officers that go out every day. And when they leave their families, you know what they leave their families? They demonstrate it sometimes. They give their life for this country. When you come here, you have to be loyal. It's a way of life. We may not always want to embrace it, but Angliston's father had it right. When he speaks about Bahamianization, it's not about hatred, you know. It's about a commitment to a country. That's what it's about. You go anywhere and you have it. And so that's all we're asking. But within this context, well, that is the law. That is the law. And if you don't like it, you go somewhere else. You go to America, that's what it is. And so, Mr. Speaker, all we're saying in the Immigration Department, we will respect the rights of all. We will do our jobs properly. We've brought a team on, Mr. Speaker, to focus heavily on customer relations. And we're with the industry. It's a partnership, a tripartite approach we're taking in financial services with immigration, with the PFSB and all those other persons. So we've asked them to provide us with secret customers. So we're training the department, but you will know, I'm asking persons to stop. I'm asking you to stop. The person who may come from Brussels may be assessing you. Somebody who may come to put in an application may be assessing you. And so that exercise is ongoing. Ongoing professional development, Mr. Speaker. Unlike other government entities, I found that we did not do that in immigration. So we're partnering with the U.S. and other diplomatic corps to see how best we can send persons away to train. We've decided to hire someone external to the department to head our complaints and corruption section. We'll have the authority to go anywhere in the Bahamas and conduct interviews, and more than just the immigration department. There are some people outside of immigration who should stop too. We're getting some good intelligence, and one of the agencies told us that they don't want to throw away their money. So when you bring someone, ensure that they can meet vetting. And I've discussed that with the union, the director, and senior members in the immigration department. They have absolutely no problems with that. And so, Mr. Speaker, we're about transforming the immigration department. The other thing that we say to those members who worked very hard, and they demonstrated that during the Hurricane Dorian, is that we cannot pay you for the work that you do. I always give the example of the imposter that tried to come into the Bahamas through 9/11 and where he was prevented from coming in. And I always say that if that individual was allowed to come into the Bahamas, we didn't have to worry as to whether or not our brother from the north would have come into this country, because we saw what happened to those persons who they thought was connected with it. And so if those individuals were able to come into the Bahamas and create a cell, that might have been a different story. But we had a vigilant and diligent immigration on duty that day, and they were able to do what is necessary. We continue to conduct operations, and we're focusing heavily on the legal points and also the unlegal points of entry into the Bahamas. Mr. Speaker, I now turn to trade and industry. I now turn to trade and industry, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, you know, we have signed on to the Economic Partnership Agreement. We want to commend the UK for reopening its office here in the Bahamas. We're still working assiduously, Mr. Speaker, to assist our industry partners through the Industries Encouragement Act. Mr. Speaker, recently we had the experience with the World Trade Organization. Mr. Speaker, I know that there was a lot of furor in the community as to whether or not the Bahamas would join or not join. Well, now we know that that cannot happen, at least for within the next 5 years. Mr. Speaker, our international partners, as well as our chief negotiator, all recognize that, and my predecessor in office, all recognize that the accession process to WTO was purely aspirational. But Mr. Speaker, coming out of that experience, Mr. Speaker, we have to continue the process, our educational process, in terms of how we approach the whole question of joining the WTO. We know that the only country in this hemisphere that is not a partner is the Bahamas. Mr. Speaker, either you're at the table to make the decisions or you're not at the table. But at the end of the day, Mr. Speaker, those decisions will affect you. Mr. Speaker, but we know that in the interim, there are a number of pieces of legislation, Mr. Speaker, that are very important to our way of life in the Bahamas. And I would just like to speak to a few of them. I'll just name them, Mr. Speaker. You have the tariff rate quota regulations, the animal health, food and safety and plant regulations, the protection of new plant varieties bill, the procurement bill, and a number of others. But just let me focus on these ones. The foreign, the custom management regulations, the protection of new plant varieties bill, the intellectual property regulations. Mr. Speaker, we've drafted the bills, but we need the regulations. Mr. Speaker, for too long in this country, we've allowed our intellectual property to go, to allow people to abuse it. I always speak about Joseph Spence, whole thing purchased. We produced the bark that produced Campari. And we allow people to just use it. We don't have a copyright on it. As a matter of fact, I even spoke to, and I'll just go on, I spoke to last year when the boys did produce the song. No copyright. I say you get absolutely nothing from that. But this is what people are doing now. We're now saying that we will decriminalize marijuana in certain sense. What people are doing are going around the world now is just asking you for a leaf of the plant. And they take your plant because they're different grades, and they take it. And you get absolutely nothing from it. Reggae music, one of the most powerful forms of communications around the world. They didn't brand it, they didn't secure it, so everybody could use it. And so you see that happening all around us, but we have to move quickly. So everything about joining the WTO, Mr. Speaker, wasn't wrong. There was the report produced by the Chamber of Commerce, an excellent report that outlines what were the effects of the WTO. So, Mr. Speaker, we will continue to move so you will see a number of bills laid that are in the best interest of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. We'll continue the public discussions, and we will move on to see how best we can treat in a respectful way with the whole issue of the WTO. Mr. Speaker, we are a transparent. Mr. Speaker, I crave your indulgence just for three, four more minutes.
Right. Long Island 3 minutes.
And they call it the Long Island 3 minutes. I'm not, there's a value proposition for the Bahamas, Mr. Speaker, when one looks at financial services. And I'm happy that I've spoken to the tripartite approach that we're conducted now with financial services. We realize that we cannot do it alone. So the government needs institutions like AIBT, the Chamber of Commerce, the Bahamas Financial Services Board, in order to safeguard a transparent, integral or financial services sector that is second to none. And so, Mr. Speaker, there's been any number of legislation that we've laid, whether it be substance requirements. We've done very well over the years, over the past 20 years, and don't mind the noise in the market, Mr. Speaker. All of us, every successive government for the past 20-odd years fully appreciates that 15% of the gross domestic product of this country comes from the financial services sector, that it undergirds a large segment of our middle class. And so, Mr. Speaker, when we come to address issues of the OECD or the Financial Action Task Force, or the common reporting standards, or the EU, Mr. Speaker, we do it in a way that, along with the industry. So when we sit to discuss these issues, Mr. Speaker, the group from STEP is at the table, and everybody is making their contributions. And that's why you would hear Exuma would say sometimes when we bring certain bills that you have not corresponded or interacted with certain members of the industry to get their input from what we're doing. But, Mr. Speaker, we're working extremely hard to do that. And we're doing very well. We've demonstrated the skill and the versatility thus far that we are compliant with at least 30 of the 40 requirements of the Financial Action Task Force. I know that the Attorney General, he's away now dealing with the self-same issue. We've just had our review and we're waiting for that. Mr. Speaker, we understand that it's an uneven playing field. Some of the jurisdictions that are still connected with their European counterparts or their motherland, as you would say, are not judged as harshly as places like the Bahamas would be judged. Some European countries do not comply with the level of enthusiasm or vigor or enterprise like the Bahamas does, and they are not graded or judged like the Bahamas. And so, Mr. Speaker, we know that the intent of the international community is to really rid itself of these jurisdictions. But what we're doing, Mr. Speaker, is we're developing different, new, and innovative products, Mr. Speaker. And one of the ways we've done that is through the Commercial Enterprises Act. And Mr. Speaker, I've heard persons speak about that act. That is the only act, Mr. Speaker, in the Bahamas that requires a comprehensive report to be given in terms of how Bahamians will be involved in companies. The act identifies areas for which Bahamians are not generally involved in and invites persons to come in and invest, Mr. Speaker. So we've been working extremely hard. There's a lot more that I can say that I will reserve for the budget debate, Mr. Speaker. But in all the circumstances, I want to commend our leader. There are certain countries who have yet, Puerto Rico, have yet to recover from the hurricane. Bahamians, private, the international community, New Orleans, have yet to recover. But steadily, we've gone in there. Nobody who has equipment in this country is complaining. And I know that because we've invited all to come down. Once you can get your equipment to the island, you have work, and we've been clearing it up. Pardon me? Pardon me? To clear it up. So, Mr. Speaker, I just want to remind us that for Abaco and Freeport, Grand Bahama, for this country, because we're all one, and I agree with Pinewood, we're all one, that we're still in a state of emergency. We still have to respond very quickly. There's still children who need to go to school, and we're working. But I want to say to the great constituency of Yamakura that your MP has gone nowhere. This afternoon, if God spare my life, I will be there at 6 o'clock, and persons can attest to that. On this coming Tuesday, I want to say that none other than the Minister of Health, as we do every month, we have our constituency association meetings, and that is where I find myself to answer any and all questions. And if I cannot answer them, I give my word that I would find someone to answer them. So for those who are putting out the erroneous lies that Ellsworth Johnson is not in Yamakro, I have my generals out and about. Pardon me? I have my generals out and about, and we have sounded the battle cry, and we are more than ready, willing, and able for 2022. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Honorable Member. As many, the chair recognizes the Honorable Member for Pine Ridge.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Permit me, as I beg your indulgence, Mr. Speaker, before I get into my dissertation, I wish to speak about an institution. And I refer to it as an institution because of its longevity, having begun in the somewhere about 1925, and it continues to have a subsidiary within the island of Grand Bahama, which began somewhere in about 1950. I refer to it as an institution because it has ministers of the gospel, law enforcement officers, magistrate, doctors, and educators and professionals of society that help to make up this particular organization. This organization, prior to Hurricane Doreen, represented its institution and organization, along with representing the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. This institution has impacted the lives of many Bahamians throughout the Bahamas and was what I would refer to as ambassadorial persons representing the country in Houston, Texas. I like to refer to them as persons who can and have contributed to what I like to refer to, as opposed to what the Ministry of Tourism often refer to them as. I like to refer to these persons as what I call persons who have promoted and continue to promote Christian tourism in the Bahamas. And I speak of none other than the Bahamas Brass Band. They represented us very well in Houston, Texas. They marched, I think, before some 10 million people. And not only that, they were able to do interviews with Fox News and CBS. And of course, they did some interviews with ZNS, who also traveled with them during that occasion. I make this appeal, first of all, to commend Pastor Barry Morris and the Bahamas Brass Band for what they did as ambassadors of the Bahamas during that time, but also stand on my feet to ask the minister that if there's anything you can do to continue to help such a strong institution, to promote the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, and indeed the Kingdom of God at the same time, we would appreciate, because they have done so much to influence so many lives within the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. And they were one of the first set of organizations out the gate telling the world that the Bahamas is still open for business. Pastor Barry Morris, the Bahamas Brass Band, we commend you. Also, I beg your indulgence to wish a brother, a friend, a collegiate Presbyterian of mine a very happy birthday. I wish you long life, my brother. I speak of none other than Bishop Kermit Eugene Sanders, my brother and my friend. And I pray that God will continue to bless you. May the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be acceptable in your sight, O God, my strength and my Redeemer. Amen. Mr. Speaker, I count it an honor and a privilege to stand forthright in this hollow place on behalf of the good and gracious people of Pine Ridge. Their electoral generosity has afforded me this opportunity I anticipate that they will continue to embrace my ability to serve them with humility and courageousness. It is because of them, the people of Pine Ridge, and indeed the prompting of Grand Bohemians, I'm able to dialogue, debate, and deliberate in this legislative place. Mr. Speaker, we've been elected into governance some 2.5 years. And for some people, 2.5 years seem like 25. There are those who share the view, because I've been one of the voices crying in the wilderness, that my advocacy has to do with sour grapes. Some are of that opinion, or some are of the opinion that I'm bitter or upset because I was overlooked for a position. There are those who want you to believe that for their own political benefit. Nothing can be so further from the truth. If I were in a place of position, no doubt I would have been fired by now or resigned. I ascribe to principle, justice, and fair play, especially as a believer in Christ. It's what I've always sought to practice. My Christianity doesn't function only on Sunday, but 24/7. I was not placed in the cabinet because God did not want me there. He wanted me right here, fighting for the people of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. I couldn't do what I'm doing over here if I was sitting over there. To all political pundits out there, with novices sitting in here, this is the conclusion of the whole matter. One might have thought he was blocking me, but God was actually protecting me. And one can only detect this in time. Mr. Speaker, from day 2, when I came in here, or from day 2 when I came in here and we weren't here, acting like we were elected by another country and overlooking the needs of Bahamians who were at the time hurting, I've been speaking for and on behalf of those people ever since. When I would try to show us the error of our ways in this venue, they laughed, ridiculed, ostracized, and victimized me, and yet I remained steadfast. Mr. Speaker, I wasn't moved because I knew and know in whom I believe in. And I was always persuaded that he would allow me to keep that which he committed unto me until that day. Mr. Speaker, the irony was that while many in here was, and some still are, fighting for a man, few of us had made up in our mind to fight for the people. Some still don't comprehend that the man you fight for will have to give an account to the same people you overlook them for. I, he, she, or they. They would not be here if it were not for the people. How do you ignore the people who place you in here? I assume, and I can be assured, that the people will have their time. Then we'll all understand in short order what it means. It's the people's time. The Bahamian people are tired. Mr. Speaker, words like accountability, transparency, credibility, trust, better, honesty, and forward thinking used to be the mantra of an F&M government. These words helped to build a legacy of the F&M. And in one term, those words seem to have lost its potency within this political regime. I used to preach this, and I still do. I used to say, what it takes a man 25 years to build could be destroyed within an hour, or in this case, one term. Accountability, transparency, credibility, trust, better, honesty, forward thinking? When we call these words, the vast majority in this country no longer take us seriously. I came to tell you, the Bahamian people are tired. Mr. Speaker, pre-Hurricane Dorian, we were selling the Grand Lucayan Hotel. We were told about a letter of intent. We were told it would be sold 6 months after coming into office. We were told if you fix Grand Bahama, you fix the economy of the Bahamas. I guess this justifies why the Bahamas economy is still limping along. Not only did we acquire the assets from Hutchison Whampoa, we also got their liabilities to include the service packages, water, and light bills. We paid for 2 golf carts and got 1. The appraised value of the property was $39 million. We paid $65 million plus, and we're still paying today. Meanwhile, Hutchison gets the insurance money of nearly $80 million and then turns around and gives the government a mortgage on the property that they bought from them. Now we're trying to purchase the airport from the same people who again have collected major insurance money and will walk away with the government holding the bag of a failed assets and liabilities while they head to the bank laughing at us. This government has taken on a billionaire's company liabilities and assets, which places us further in the economic hole or the red, or in the red, if you please. This government is trying to convince the country that they're the smartest government since sliced bread. All I can tell you, the Bahamian people are tired. Mr. Speaker, when we first came to office, we promised the people a relief on breadbasket items. It never happened. When we first came to office, it never happened. When we first came to office, the people were placed to the back of the line, while special interests were moved to the front. We promised to appeal that taxation. Instead, we increased taxes on the backs of the Bahamian people, and then decided that we would give them the breadbasket items only after we would have raised taxes on their backs. The Bahamian people are tired. Mr. Speaker, we said that we would not tolerate any conflict of interest, only to hear a conflicting story from a former cabinet minister as to how the post office ended up in his building. Based on his own words, somewhere, someplace, he described it as a conflict of interest. Yet the government chooses to convince the rest of us it is not so. The Bahamian people are tired. Mr. Speaker, the government has taken political opponents to court and thus far today has lost every case, despite hiring of foreign QCs. That money which was wasted should have been spent on the citizenry. To date, we have no account as to what these trials have cost the Bahamian people. We have brought in attorneys from Africa, placed them in the Attorney General's office, only to have them in authority and in senior positions over qualified Bahamians who actually know the Bahamas and its laws. Yet you want to convince us, the Bahamian people, that you're pro-Bahamian.
The chair recognizes the honorable member for Yamakro on a point of order.
And I think the honorable member for Pine Ridge was a part of the debate where we moved the amendments to the Constitution to bring in an independent director of public prosecution. Who drove, Mr. Speaker?
Honorable member.
Is he going to speak? Come on, Reverend. Thank you very much. Mr. Speaker, who drove This process, Mr. Speaker, separate and apart from the government. That office is sufficiently entrenched. Mr. Speaker, I'm being heckled by the member for Cat Island. If I could be allowed to speak. No, he's a senior man. Don't heckle me. Please. Mr. Speaker,
I get heckled all the time. Don't worry.
we were part of a debate where we amended the Constitution and brought in an independent director of public prosecution who were part of the process. Mr. Speaker, there's been any number, Gonzalo Sabola and a number of other senior jurists who have been brought to this jurisdiction, and they've done an exemplary job, Mr. Speaker, in enriching the jurisprudence of the Bahamas. And if the Director of Public Prosecutions and others decide, Mr. Speaker, I'm being heckled. No, I'm not speaking, Mr. Speaker. I just sat because the honourable member for Pine Ridge, I've given the point of order that he is misleading the House, Mr. Speaker.
Honourable member.
That he has misled the House. The government has very little to do with that. There's an appointment process that has little to do with the government. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, the question still begs to ask, my lord, is the deputy directors of prosecution, well, that too, because that's what they do to us. They persecuting us. That's exactly what they're doing to us. That's exactly what they're doing to us. Why do you need foreigners to hold such a position when Bahamians are quite qualified with all these QCs in the Bahamas? I didn't have to tell, I wasn't told. I read that. This been out for a while. Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker. That's the problem right now. I hear East Grand Bahama from there. That's the problem. They underestimate me continuously. Continuously. The Bahamian people, yet you want to convince us, the Bahamian people, that you're pro-Bahamian, despite you hiring foreign QCs and foreign attorneys. I am persuaded the Bahamian people are tired. Mr. Speaker, there have been debacles after another. The Oban fiasco, Mr. Speaker, there's been debacle after the other. The Oban fiasco has not left our minds. The files conveniently disappeared, and the police have still not yet been able to locate them. We preach austerity to the people, yet we're still extravagant as a government, increasing travel, not just for ourselves, but for spouses as well, with a hefty per diem daily, while people can't afford to buy food in this nation. The taxpayers are paying for cabinet ministers' spouses and children insurances for people who claim to be multi-millionaires. Meanwhile, the rest of us,
The chair recognizes the honourable member for Bamboo Town.
Mr. Speaker, point of order. The reality is the member is talking about cabinet ministers' insurances. Mr. Speaker, from independence, from Lyndon Oscar Pinland's time, cabinet ministers, their wives and children have insurance. Ask the member from inception. So he's speaking as if this administration, Mr. Speaker, he's speaking as if this administration implemented insurance for cabinet ministers.
The same thing with police
This has been that way from independence. And Mr. Speaker, he's speaking as if spouses was not allowed on trips. Spouses was approved for one trip previously by all cabinets. One. Okay? It was always that way. And there was a per diem. Folks need to stop trying to mislead this place, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, considering that the government, considering that my government,
Honorable members,
considering that my government tried to convince us how bad things were and how bad things are, perhaps, listen up. Meanwhile, the rest of us sitting up in here and out there, spouses and children don't seem to count or are not as important. The Bahamian people are tired. Yeah, but if you would just sit down and let me deliver, this half-hour speech is going to be an hour and a half, I can see. Mr. Speaker, the reality is, many of you sitting in here are depending on the people out there to maintain the lifestyle that some of you have just walked into. Yet you're treating the people with second-class citizens. As it up there. But some, I didn't say everybody, I said some. I made it clear.
What about me?
I don't mean
I see you talking about over there.
you're well endowed. You're coming here endowed. Meanwhile, darling,
honorable member. Honorable member for Pine Ridge. You have the floor.
thank you, Mr. Speaker. Meanwhile, post-Hurricane Dorian, the Bahamas Mortgage Corporation has done a dismal job in straightening out Bahamians who are affected by the storm with their houses. In some cases, they seem to be more combative, tedious, and unsympathetic to many Bahamians who were and are in need. Why do you all feel that you can sit in?
Come on, man. I want to hear.
Mr. Speaker, in some cases, they seem, and I'm talking about Bahamas Mortgage Corporation, seem more combative, tedious, and unsympathetic to many Bahamians who were and are in need. Why do you all feel that you can sit in your Nassau office and know what's going on in Grand Bahama? Why can't you listen to the people in Grand Bahama who knows it and feels it? Allow Grand Bahama to make decisions based on the people who you place in position on Grand Bahama or any family island for that matter. To do otherwise is political control. When there are major disasters, political control and cherry picking, who gets and who don't get, is undemocratic, specifically to those in need. We all pay taxes in this country. We're all entitled to the benefit that any government contributes to its people. Hear me, and hear me well. The Bahamian people are tired. Mr. Speaker, people feel more abandoned since Hurricane Dorian. People are tired of being told, go here, go there, social service, NEMA, Ministry of Work, the Disaster Authority. From line to line, people are feeling depressed, devalued, disappointed, and disrespected. Hurricane victims throughout this country will tell you the Bahamian people are tired. Mr. Speaker, we borrowed $3 billion since coming to office. The tragedy of all of this, people can't see, touch, or feel anything as a result of this borrowing. The national debt has gone up. The debt to GDP has increased. Notwithstanding, you all say things are better. For who? For the ordinary and average man on the street? Ask them and they will tell you without fear of contradiction. The Bahamian people are tired. Mr. Speaker, the other day, we up and told the world that we got tourism running 70 days after Hurricane Dorian. And the world could learn from us. First of all, Hurricane Dorian did minimum damage, if any, to New Providence. The majority of the tourists always came to Nassau. Grand Bahama and Abaco have not yet caught themselves touristically or otherwise. Why make others believe that New Providence was affected when it wasn't? Again, people know the Bahamas. The people know, again, people who knows the Bahamas know what took place and know where it took place. This verbal jargon only causes the government to lose credibility internationally. This is why they say we're shady, we fabricate stories, we don't tell the truth, and we're not honest with the Bahamian people. Hence, we have been dubbed the Pinocchio government. People don't want no more fairy tale. The Bahamian people are tired. Mr. Speaker, we promised the people last summer that there would be no load shedding. This was the worst we've ever seen BPL performing under any government in this regard. We fired an entire board without explanation. We borrowed money, more money, despite the borrowing of more money for BPL to make it better. They turned around and added taxes, in my opinion, on us by adding more money to the bill by some 15% beginning in March. We've allowed our people to go to the grocery store, to walk out with items in their hand, because this government felt it was more important to charge the people through these stores and businesses 25 cents with a maximum of $2 on a plastic bag plus VAT, rather than allowing the inventory to fade out. I come to tell you, the Bahamian people are tired. We have been moving deceptively when it comes to our people. With what we say and what we do, we're looking dishonest. Mr. Speaker, the other day, just to get some people to speak to them, we told the public we were having a community town meeting. People from all political persuasions and independent thinking Bahamians showed up to voice their concerns, only to find out that when they got there, the leader going up shouting F&Ms? F&Ms? You mean to tell me, even to have a rally, we have to trick people into believing it's a town meeting? If you want to have a rally, call a rally, and let's see who will show up. These are the things that make us look dubious, even if we're not. That's why they're calling us the Pinocchio government. The Bahamian people are tired. It's like Pharaoh's government. You're trying to get people to turn straws into brick. We continue to burden the backs of the Bahamian people. We seem to be a government for the rich, richer, and richest. All this money in taxation, borrowing, and still taxing us enormously is still not sitting well with the poor, middle class, or upper class Bahamians. I tell you, the Bahamian people are tired. It's like those in authority in this country lack compassion, sympathy, empathy when it comes to the Bahamian people. Mr. Speaker, let me speak about Grand Bahama a little after Hurricane Dorian. Grand Bahama Power, after the storm, gave us a bill for September, despite the fact that we hardly had electricity on the island in the month of September due to the storm. They told us when the bill came that that they were guesstimating the bill and that they would adjust it in the month of October. Mr. Speaker, the people's light bill and water bill were practically the same as if we never had a storm. It's like everybody is trying to swing us in this country. In Grand Bahama, it's like when it's not the government, it's the port. When it's not the port, it's the government. Our water bill today is still just as high as if we had good water. The water is still salty and we're being charged. And if you have a head cold, you need not go to the sea in Grand Bahama. Just stand under your shower. More now than ever, Grand Bahama questions the relevancy of the Grand Bahama Port Authority. There is a lack of vision and non-productivity coming out of the pink building in my constituency on Pioneers Way in Grand Bahama. Grand Bahamians are also concluding the Bahamian people are tired. I said it before and I'll say it again. We have no hospital presently. We're operating out of a makeshift tent. The surroundings places our patients, doctors, nurses, and administrators in the elements under substandard conditions, which are not forward-thinking. Mr. Speaker, we wouldn't mind having to wait for the refurbishing of the RAN, but one would have thought that while we were out, they would be trying to improve the hospital conditions and spend more money to make the hospital better than it was prior to Dorian. Yes. Then people wouldn't mind the sacrifice. But we're sacrificing to get the same old, same old. No. While the people are out, I would have used this time to better conditions at the RAN structurally. We seem to forget
Honorable member.
the storm.
The chair recognizes the honorable member for Elizabeth on a point of order.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the honorable member, while he is having a good time, is misleading the public and this honorable house. The renovations to the RAN Memorial will result in an expanded intensive care unit. It will result in renovations of termite damaged structures, rusty pipes being removed, the ventilation is going to be fixed, roof is going to be fixed, and 2 brand new wards. Now, if that's not better than there was before, I don't know what the honorable member would like to see. So please confine yourself to the facts.
Giving us more clarity and to informing us and informing us that we were no, but it's your duty to tell and inform. I don't have to ask, you can inform. And you're doing that. You're doing that just now. And we thank you for that. But replacing the rusty pipes and fixing the roof are things that we think should have long been done. What we'd like to know is if we should have another storm in this summer, the flooding conditions, I would have liked to see us elevating ourselves higher so that we don't have this problem again of flooding, because this is not the first time that this has happened. Don't matter, it has happened. That's the point. We should fix it. You got the time, you got the money. All this money we got $100 million from IDB for such a case. The Bahamian people, by the way, Mr. Speaker, by the way, health workers throughout this country will tell you the Bahamian people are tired. Mr. Speaker, Hugh Campbell Primary School in my constituency, one of the largest primary schools in Grand Bahama, went through a storm in September 2019. And it still looks like it's in a storm in February 2020. The environments are not conducive for students, teachers, faculty. All this money we claim that we got, even before the storm, for a storm, you would have think that the priority would be the school, hospital, and airport immediately thereafter. The doctors, the nurses, the principals, the teachers, the students, administrative and civil servants would all tell you the Bahamian people are tired. The condition of the police officers on Grand Bahamas find themselves living in. They are owned by the police force. The government buildings are atrocious. These buildings which our officers reside in are unacceptable. What's worse, because they're officers, their spouses go to apply for assistance from social service so as to receive help with the living conditions that worsened during the hurricane. They were told that they could not get assistance because they're government employees. This is wrong. Police officers pay taxes as well. If you're not going to allow them to be helped by the state, then the Ministry of National Security should see to it that living conditions are improved ASAP. I believe if the Assistant Commissioner of Police, the superintendents, the inspectors, or high-ranking officers, if it's not good enough for them, it's not good enough for any of our officers to live in. I implore the minister and the commissioner, outgoing or incoming, to better the living conditions of the officers in Trip Circle vicinity and beyond. Police officers, the beat, the bicyclists, the motorbike riders, the car, the mobile patrol, the jeeps, along with the defense and police and prison officers are sad to report. The Bahamian people are tired. Mr. Speaker, and I'm wrapping it up. Mr. Speaker, I want you to know that it is a shame for the contractual employers who work for government in this country for 10, 15, 20 plus years and are still not permanent and pensionable. This is a disgrace and shameful in the eyes of God and man. We implore you to make the crooked path straight. Contractual workers throughout this country will tell you that the Bahamian people are tired. I want to say something else, Mr. Speaker. Today, there is a tent at the Grand Bahama Airport. Under that tent are customs, immigration, police, and defense force officers stationed there. The conditions are atrocious for these professionals who render services to the Bahamian and international community, working under the tent in the hot sun all day with no decent bathroom. The people at Western Air are in a better working condition than the government workers stationed at the airport. It's a shame and disgrace. We come in here talking about what we got and what we're going to borrow. All the government workers at the airport in Grand Bahama will tell you the Bahamian people are tired. To my brothers and sisters in Abaco, I'm praying for you. I hear the keys are moving along quite well and fine because the people themselves are taking care of business. However, on the mainland, Marsh Harbor, Dundas Town, Murphytown, Spring City, wherever the government has full range, I'm told it's slower than slow. Eskimo City is not impressive at all, and the hurricane season will be upon us shortly. And am I to assume, because we have built no hurricane shelter, is this where they're going to stay during hurricane season? Considering that we have mandatory evacuation, the people of Abaco will tell you throughout the mainland and the Key, the Bahamian people are tired. I would have thought, and I'm just about through, Mr. Speaker, I would have thought almost 3 years into governance, this government, the least they should have done to me, as opposed to victimizing and ostracizing me, was to shut me up. The way to shut me up is to improve the economy. Be fair, balanced, and inclusive with your decision. Take constructive criticism from your peers and the people with participatory democracy rather than dictatorial arrogance. That's how you shut me and others up. The Bahamian people are tired. Every time I think you should be doing something with sense.
Honorable member.
Yes, wrapping it up.
Are you on your final paragraph? I've extended you more than 3 minutes.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, I'm getting this short. I'm wrapping up. I really am. Yes.
Are you on your final paragraph?
Yes, I'm moving towards. Yes,
No.
Mr. Speaker. Yes, Mr. Speaker. Yes, Mr. Speaker. I'm not going to be long. Y'all been hackling me for a while. Yeah. Every time I think you should be doing towards something beneficial, it seems like we sink again in the quicksand. Let me just rest this here, and I'm just about done. You would have believed that this government, who is far keener on getting bananas from Haiti rather than Andros and Long Island, would have seen the need to improve BAMSI. Recognizing the importance of a country becoming more self-sufficient in agriculture industry in order to feed ourselves is paramount. We did nothing to improve ourselves as it relates to BAMSI significantly enough as a government to feed ourselves. We can't afford ourselves. He's a good man. We can't feed ourselves. But the government's recommendation is that we grow dope. Our priority says mix up here. We can't feed ourselves. We're not growing cabbage, lettuce, tomatoes, cucumbers, etc. in enough quantity for the nation. We have no major animal farm, but we're ready to create a marijuana farm. So the government believes that our way to economic success is ganja farms. I guess according to this government, if we don't eat, we could all smoke. The Bahamian people are tired. While some of us, I'm finishing now.
Honorable,
Honestly, I'm finishing now.
honorable member, I've already extended you more than 5 minutes.
Let me do the last. I will close out.
Honorable member,
I am being honest. You perhaps can't handle the honesty. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honorable
Much
member,
obliged. I'm good.
I'm giving you 30 seconds and then that's it.
Okay. I'm wrapping up. The Bahamian people are tired of government coming in here arguing about who was the worst government among themselves. The Bahamian people are tired of the two juristic political entities that use them to advance their personal cause to get in here and then ignore them when they arrive. The Bahamian people are tired. The Bahamian people want better, need better, and deserves better for the sake of our children's children. Mr. Speaker, I thank you for your time, and I thank the Bahamian people for listening to me as they usually do. God bless them, and God bless you, sir. And I take my seat as I leave you with these 5 words. The Bahamian people are tired.
Thank you, honorable member. As the chair recognizes the honorable member for East Grand Bahama. On a point of order?
Yes, Mr. Speaker. There's 2 inaccurate statements that were made, and I just want to make sure the record reflects them. One is in respect to value-added tax. One was in respect to value-added tax. The statement was made that we did not do anything with respect to the bread basket items, and that is incorrect. The record will reflect, Mr. Speaker. In fact, the law will reflect. The law will reflect that we removed value-added tax on bread basket items. So there is no tax, no value-added tax on bread basket items. That is a fact, Mr. Speaker, as well as medicine.
Honorable member, the member is on a point of order.
As well as medicines and some other items. Mr. Speaker, the second
Honorable member,
item,
resume your seat. I'm listening to the member for East Grand Bahama. He said he has 2 points.
Yes.
He's given the first one.
yes. The second point is the member spoke about growing the economy. And I just want to advise him, the Bahamian people, that for the last 2 years, the economy has grown 1.4% in the first year, 1.6 in the first year, 1.8 in the second year. And so the statement is that he said it wasn't growing, it was growing. And it's important to note, Mr. Speaker, that prior to that, it was actually regressing. The economy was actually in a downward spiral. So I just wanted to correct the record for that.
Thank you, honorable member.
Mr. Speaker.
Honorable member, the chair recognizes the honorable member for Pine Ridge.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Are you attempting to
Yes,
refute?
Mr. Speaker. I never said that bread basket items were taxed. What I indicated is that we never brought the bread basket items to this place when we said we would have brought it to this place. And what I also indicated was that when the bread basket items did come to this place, it was accompanied with taxes on the backs of the Bahamian people. And with regards to growing the economy, I never stated that the economy in this speech, I never stated that it's not growing. No, I never did say that. But what I did say was that the national debt had grown and the debt to GDP had grown. Those are easily verifiable facts.
As many?
Don't try and come in here and try to make me sound like I don't know what they cannot say. Oh, because I know what I'm saying. And so don't try to, don't
Honorable members,
intellectual dishonesty.
honorable members,
Intellectual dishonesty. Thank you. No, no. No, that's your arrogance. That's you. That's you. No, you're agitated.
honorable members, honorable members.
I know you.
Let us proceed.
Think I know.
Let us proceed.
How dare you?
As many?
Pompous, that's why. You're very pompous. I hear you.
The chair recognizes the honorable member for Tall Pines.
I'm scared of you, brother. I'm scared of you.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, it's always a pleasure.
Don't intimidate me. I'm not intimidated by
It's
you.
always a pleasure, Mr. Speaker, to rise
I'm not intimidated by
in
you.
this house.
Honorable
Mr. Speaker.
members.
Come in here.
The chair rec-
You try to
the chair rec-
they do it to you right now.
Honorable member for Pine Ridge. Honorable member for Pine Ridge. Give my deputy the member for Tall Pines an opportunity.
Who sat so comfortably, Mr. Speaker, and listened to every word from the good member for Pine Ridge. As I listened to the good member for East Grand Bahama defend himself. Mr. Speaker, it's always a pleasure to be in this House and to represent the good people of Tall Pines. As I rise this evening, Mr. Speaker, to support the supplemental appropriation 2020, we call it midterm budget, and the table corresponding supplemental appropriations and borrowing resolutions on behalf of the people of Tall Pines. Mr. Speaker, I'd just like to start off by inviting the members of this House and the listening public, the watching public, to think with me for a second. Yesterday, Mr. Speaker, I was taking a flight from Atlanta to Fort Lauderdale, and I sat and I heard two women behind me speaking, and they were, one of the women, they were telling the other that she was going to Fort Lauderdale on vacation. And one of the ladies were telling her where to go in South Florida, etc. And interestingly, one of the women asked the other, have you ever been to the Bahamas? And she said, yes, I was in the Bahamas about 2 years ago, and I was there with my daughter. And we had the best time of our lives. And Mr. Speaker, she said, at that moment when she was in the Bahamas, and having had that experience in the Bahamas, she decided and made a resolution to herself that from this day forward, she's gonna enjoy her life, and she's gonna take every vacation she could take because of her enjoyment, her passion, and what she was able to experience in the Bahamas.
Must have been the bride.
Mr. Speaker, actually, she was in Nassau. But I'm sure the experience would have been just as good in Eleuthera. But then, interestingly, Mr. Speaker, the other lady turned to her and said, wow, I've been to the Bahamas. And when I go there, I wonder what pill they put in the waters, because the waters are so beautiful. And it's an amazing place. And as I sat there, Mr. Speaker, I sat there because they didn't know I was listening to them. But it dawned on me, as we debate in this House, and I know that we have different opinions, but it dawned on me that I happen to be living in one of the, if not the greatest country in the world. Yeah. It dawned on me, Mr. Speaker, it dawned on me that and I'm sure, Mr. Speaker, if I had turned around and say that I'm a member of Parliament, the member of Parliament for Tall Pines, and I hear what you're saying, and I say to them, and I was to say, we just went through about a year ago, one of the most, not one of the most devastating tropical experience that this country, and one would argue in the Western Hemisphere, has gone through. And notwithstanding that, we're able today to come in this honorable House and to continue to talk about record tourism numbers, to continue to talk about the advancement that we're having in the Bahamas, the ability to be able to come and debate, Mr. Speaker, in this supplemental budget about how we're able to progress and build our schools, how we're able to build our streets and our hospitals in Grand Bahama and in Abaco, how we're able to help through social services our people, notwithstanding all of that disaster, that we must be proud as Bahamians. We must be, as we sit in our homes, and I sympathize with those persons from Abaco and Grand Bahama. But the truth of the matter is, the Bahamas is still the greatest place in the world to live. And we should feel, and I feel very honored, Mr. Speaker, to stand here in this honorable House and to say to the people of Tall Pines that this F&M government, we continue on a daily basis to think about your needs. We continue to inspire, to bring about the best fiscal, to be more fiscal responsible. We continue, Mr. Speaker, to grapple with the needs of not only our friends and our brothers and sisters in Grand Bahama and Abaco, but we think about even our brothers and sisters in Angliston. And I heard the member for Angliston talking about her constituents somehow feeling left out. And I thought about it, and I said, I didn't want to disturb her because I was told by someone to leave the member for Angliston. But I thought about it, and I was like, we in the F&M, we committed ourselves to the over-the-hill community in ways unprecedented in the Bahamas. We committed ourselves to building homes and building lives in the people of the over-the-hill communities on an unprecedented level. I'm not saying that every single household is getting it right now, but I can tell you the communities are getting it. The Bahamian people as a whole is benefiting. I want to say that because I want us to take and sit and think in perspective that this government and the people of the Bahamas, we're experiencing some things that we really have to be careful of how we speak about each other. We have to be careful about how we put out there to the world of how we're treating each other. Because the truth of the matter is that this government is responding to Bahamian people. This government is responding to Abaco in a way that no other government has had to respond to any other island in the Bahamas. This government is responding to Grand Bahama at the levels that no other government has had to respond to communities in Grand Bahama before. And so I'm appreciative of what this government is doing. I'm appreciative of what this F&M government has committed itself to in this supplemental budget. And I feel very proud, Mr. Speaker, to rise here on behalf of the people of Tall Pines. Mr. Speaker, in 2008, the government of the Bahamas, this free national government, presented to this Honorable House and the Bahamian people the Fiscal Responsibility Act. And it revolutionized the way that we take our fiscal responsibility in this Commonwealth. This piece of legislation, as you would know, Mr. Speaker, caused this government to put in place mechanisms to contain government spending by the force of law. And I would put it to you, Mr. Speaker, and I put it to this House, that this government continues through this supplemental midterm budget, continues to demonstrate that we are still operating in this new fiscal regime. That this supplemental budget, Mr. Speaker, speaks to our commitment to reporting to the Bahamian people and being transparent to the Bahamian people as we had committed to them prior to being elected. And Mr. Speaker, so when I look at and hear what we've been able to do over the last few months, I feel very proud. And I must say that the people of Tall Pines, Mr. Speaker, we have stepped up to the plate as much as we have stepped up to the plate to assist the government. Speaker, I'm the member for West Grand Bahama, or West End and Bimini, West Grand Bahama and Bimini. The various members from Freeport would know that the people of Tall Pines, we able to get donations from our friends in South Florida, particularly the mayor and the people of Miami Gardens, and we went there and we distributed to the communities in Grand Bahama. The people of Tall Pines, Mr. Speaker, we went into the Red Cross and we donated our time in helping buy clothing and food, etc. We've been able, Mr. Speaker, to get donations and to distribute them. Myself and yourself, Mr. Speaker, we visited the communities where these persons were held in Fox Hill and at the Sports Center, representing Nassau Village and representing the people of Tall Pines, and by large representing this Parliament, the people of the Bahamas. And I know that story, Mr. Speaker, could be told by so many, if not all of us here in this honorable House. And that is why when we speak, and I want to raise this point on my feet, Mr. Member for East Grand Bahama, that I think, and that's for the future, I think whenever these things happen in our country, I think it's incumbent upon us. I know it might not be financially viable. I don't think that we're doing that bad, that we cannot do it. But I think it's important that every member of Parliament, and other jurisdictions, as I learn about other jurisdictions, members of Parliament have the opportunity to be able to travel around the country, to be able to experience and see different. Some of us haven't been to Cricket Island. Some of us haven't been to Coburn Town and other places. I think there has to be made available the funds or the resources for every member of Parliament to be able to touch the islands of the Bahamas, so that when we speak in this House, when we speak about what's going on in Abaco, if we never been in Abaco and saw it and experienced it, then it's hard for us to grapple and be able to speak to it. Speaker, I believe that every member of Parliament should know this not only Nassau and Grand Bahama, but should know every island in the Bahamas. And so when that catastrophe hit that part of Nassau, the Bahamas, all of us should have been at different stages visiting Abaco, visiting Grand Bahama. When it hit Long Island a couple of years ago, all of us had the opportunity to go there and experience it and see it. so that when Tall Pines stand up in this house, and when I speak to the millions of dollars that we have to put into building Long Island back in its farming industry, building Abaco and putting the poles and the schools and going into Grand Bahama and trying to fix Rand Memorial Hospital and etc. I could speak to it more authoritatively. I could speak to it more personally. I could look in the eyes of my Bahamians people and say, I mean, I've had the opportunity to experience it, luckily. To be able to look at them and say, I was in East Grand Bahama with the member from East Grand Bahama, and I experienced and I saw it. I was in Abaco with the member from Central Abaco, and I saw it and experienced. So I can tell you the $10 million that we're pumping into bringing power supplies, or maybe more. I'm telling you that's needed. I could say to them that I could tell you that the clinic that the member for Central Abaco spoke about, to say that the roof was down. I could tell you for fact that that's needed. And when I stand here, I want you to understand that our brothers need it. And I thank the member for East Grand Bahama and his team at the Ministry of Finance, his team, for putting together a budget that we could report to the Bahamian people. Not simply to say that we need it, but to be able to say, listen, this is what we need it for. And this is where the money is going. Just last year, Mr. Speaker, and I want to say how proud I am again of the minister. Just last year, we spoke about the Ministry of Finance developing a new budget website. And I want every Bahamian, at the end of the day, if you have the time, go on bahamasbudget.gov.bs. If you go there, you'll be able to see a very simplistic view of what this supplemental budget is all about. You'll be able to, I think, Mr. Minister, you'll be able to probably see some other the previous budgets. But if you can't go there, I know that there was a supplemental in the papers the other day, Mr. Speaker, that really simplifies it. And even someone like me who's not a real finance fella can look at it, and it's very clear. Revenue increased by 9.1%. It talks about the settlement of arrears that the minister spoke about. And it very much simplifies it. And so that you don't have to listen and say, the member of Tall Pine said this and said that. You don't have to take the words, per se, of the member for Pine Ridge, or even East Grand Bahama, or Baco City. You can see it for yourself and come to your own conclusions as to whether or not, you're going to listen to the noise in the market, or you're going to really look at what the price of the fish is. And I'm going to put it to the people of Tall Pines. I'm going to put it to the people of the Bahamas. Now, the member for East Grand Bahama, the member for Kalani, the capital of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, and every single member of this House who really, and I know we really do care about this country, that the evidence is right here, that we've been fiscally responsible, that we've been able to count and to show you where we want to go in building Abaco, and rebuilding Grand Bahama, and in fact, building this country. See it for yourselves. Examine it for yourselves. Yes, listen to these grand speeches that we make in this parliament. Yes, here are debates back and forth. But I want you yourselves. I want you yourself. bahamasbudget.gov.bs. Or get yourself a copy of this, supplemental. Speaker, I always try to encourage Bahamians to come to their own conclusions, because I believe that we are intelligent people. I believe that my young people in Tall Pines and my older people in Tall Pines, I think that we are very much a people that cares about our country. I think we're pretty much a people who want to see the Bahamas continue to do the very best. I think every member of parliament, whether you be in the backbench or whether you be in the cabinet, whether you be in opposition, or whether you be independent, that'd be one of the very best for the Bahamas. And one of the good things that this F&M government have committed to is that we're going to take the people's money and treat it as if every cent has to be accounted for. And I think that we've been very responsible in that regard. I think that we've proven ourselves in that regard. And so, yes, revenue may have decreased. The GDP may have gone up. But the reality is this: had it not been, or had we not put in place the fiscal regime that we have done, had we not committed ourselves and stayed committed to being fiscally responsible, had we not put ourselves in a position, because we were seeing growth. The minister just said that in the first 2 years, 1.6% and then 1.8%, Mr. Minister. We were seeing growth, so I think there's no doubt. If you really be reasonable, forget about the F&M label. Forget about the PLP label. Let's be real. If we were seeing growth for the first time in the history of the Bahamas for many years, if we were seeing growth in the first 2 years of this administration, then let's be reasonable. You could argue as much as you could paint it as much as you want to paint it. The truth is that we were moving in the right direction. And I put it to the Bahamian people that we are still moving in the right direction. Yes, we have some hiccups. Yes, we have to help our brothers and sisters in Albuquerque. Yes, we have to help our brothers and sisters in Grand Bahama. But that's our duty. That's the duty of the people of Tall Pines. It's our duty to help our brothers and sisters in need. And I'm so proud to stand here with this F&M government to say that we're doing just that, Mr. Speaker. Now, you could talk, Mr. Speaker, about whether or not the money is on the ground, but I feel it. I could say, in my constituency, and I know that I've been lauding the member for Marathon, who was the Minister of the Environment and Housing, because of what he's been able to do to help the people of Tall Pines. And I know we've been pushing and pushing and pushing, and I know if any constituency, and if I can say it, I can say it over and over again, if any constituency in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas is appreciative of this Free National Movement government, if any constituency in the Bahamas could see the fruit from the government of the Free National Movement government and this member of parliament, I think it's Tall Pines. Our landfill, Mr. Speaker, we've revolutionized the landfill. It's a totally different place. Our people in the Tall Pines could breathe. They could enjoy their homes. They don't have to worry about the smell. I always talk about the fact that they were afraid that their home values were depreciating. Now they don't have to worry about that anymore. To some people, that might seem simple. But the person who's living in Jubilee Gardens, the person who's living in Victoria Gardens, the person who's living on Faith Avenue, and persons who are living in the surrounding areas, that is a blessing that we would always remember this F&M government for. And I pray, Mr. Speaker, that they remember this member of parliament for. It was an election promise and we delivered on it. And so thank you, Marathon. Thank you, F&M government. And it goes beyond that, because we've been able to use our constituency fund, Mr. Speaker, to build parks. We promised that we would have a community center and a constituency office. Before I became the member of parliament speaker, there was no community center in Tall Pines. There wasn't even any constituency office. And then some people talking about they want to come back. I remember a few years ago they said that. The speaker, I'm just over there. I know they said if I lose this election, because they keep kicking me in and out, if I lose this election, I ain't coming back. But I ain't going there. I know he lost the election, and you know what, Speaker? I'm going to run in the next election on the record. Because I'm going to say, I promise you that we would fix the landfill, and Mr. Speaker, we fix the landfill. I said that we're going to establish a community center, we're going to establish an office that's going to be open for you to come and meet and talk with me, whether or not you want to tell me off, or whether or not you want to say, Don, you're doing a great job, Mr. Speaker, we have that. I said that our government is going to work on our streets and work on our schools, and Mr. Speaker, we've been able to pave streets throughout Tall Pines. We've been able to speak up the people in High Tree Estates. I wish the member for Carmichael was here. They've been complaining about this building that was on the corner that was harboring criminals and making the community bad. We just pushed that down the other day. That was a promise to live. So said, so done. I know it's the PLP phase, but it's a phase that the Tall Pines can be proud of. So said, so done. And so, Mr. Speaker, our parks, our community center, our computer lab and homework center, our streets that are being cleaned. Whoa, when we needed that water. Speaker, I'm here to say that not only has this government responded to the people of Albuquerque, not only has this people responded to the people of Grand Bahama, but they've definitely responded to the people of Tall Pines. And as a result of that, Mr. Speaker, I could not stand here and not say to the member for East Grand Bahama and the government of the Bahamas that what they are doing through this supplemental budget is not only very important for those communities, but it's important for the entire Bahamas. Because I hear over and over the members for Eleuthera, and the members of other islands members. I hear the sporting community that was talking about they wanted to use the gyms. I hear the millions of dollars that the member for Southern Shores and his ministry was putting out there to help our people. We want to put these islands back in the position of growth. We want to put these islands back in the position where their people could go back in their homes. Because once they go back, we'll be able to continue to bring this country in full circle again. We'll be able to talk and propel the tourism product. We'll be able to propel the education of our children to levels that we've never seen. Beyond what we're doing now at the University of the Bahamas. Beyond what the member for Elizabeth is doing in our health ministry. Beyond what we're doing in social services. And so, Mr. Speaker, I want to conclude by reminding the people of Tall Pines that when you could sit in an airplane and you could hear persons that don't even know you from the Bahamas, and they speak about your country, and in essence, they're speaking not only about our beaches, they're speaking about our people. They're talking about how resilient we are and how we're able to entertain them, to have them safe, to come to our country and see our communities thriving, how we're able to bounce back from these disasters, and how we're able, Mr. Speaker, to put together a budget that responds to our people, put together a budget that's responsible fiscally, to put together a budget that we know would bring us, after a while, we'll come back on track of economic growth in this country that we experienced just last year. I'm persuaded, Mr. Speaker, and I can tell you the people of Tall Pines, we are persuaded that this F&M government has delivered for us. We've seen it. I spoke about it a few minutes ago. We're persuaded, Mr. Speaker, that Tall Pines will be back in the winning column with the F&M. We're persuaded, Mr. Speaker, that as we help the people of Abaco, as we help the people of Grand Bahama, that our dollars and our cents will be put to good use. And we are very convinced that we've selected the right government to do this. A government led by Kalani, a ministry led by East Grand Bahama, a parliament with the majority members from a powerful party, a responsible party. And why should not Tall Pines want to remain on that team, that responsible team? Mr. Speaker, we support 150% this supplemental budget, this midterm budget, and we pray that the people of Abaco, the people of Grand Bahama, and indeed the people of this great commonwealth will continue to strive, will continue to be a country and a community that people talk about on planes around the world. Mr. Speaker, Tall Pines supports this supplemental budget, this midterm budget. May God bless Tall Pines, and may God bless the entire Commonwealth of the Bahamas.
Thank you, honorable member. As many? Chair recognizes the honorable member for North Andros and the Berry Islands.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to wait until I get this. This thing would make you feel like you're in church here. This guy just make you feel like you're holy when you get on this. See, I tell you. Make you feel like you're in church. So yeah, Mr. Speaker, I rise again on behalf of the beautiful people of North Andros and the Berry Islands constituency. And I want to thank them again for allowing me to be their voice in this honorable house. Mr. Speaker, but before I go on and talk about and say what I have to say, I want to first just, I don't want to do no point of order or anything, because I know I would have gotten up to speak in any event, so I could have clarified my good colleague there in Pine Ridge when he spoke about BAMSI and what we are making a choice on whether we're going to be dealing with marijuana and instead of feeding ourselves. Well, I would say that is false, because there's no comparison, none whatsoever. When it comes to us and dealing with food security, that is our number one resource. See, when you when you look at it, we're importing more than 92%. And Mr. Speaker, every time I talk in the House, I like to remind people of how important it is for us to eat what we grow and grow what we eat because of what it causes. When you look at the diseases that come from it, as which the Minister of Health normally talk about, it comes from the things that we import into our country. 92% of imported goods to compare to 8% of what we consume here in this country is really, really serious. So, you know, for such accusation like that to be said, you know, it's best to always get the facts before we go and start just bringing on. I expect for people to oppose. But when you're gonna do that, let's come with facts and be fair. That's all it is. Because you have people out there that are really listening, and some who really oppose would like to hear that. But at the end of the day, we all still have to give account to the greater one. You could win here. See why I tell you I don't want to come and put this thing in front of me because it make me want to preach. Huh?
Go ahead.
You could come and you could say what you want to say in here, and you could talk about whatever it is and mislead this parliament and all of those good things. But the facts is there. And whom God keep is well kept.
Fine, Rich, agree with that.
I would also, since he bring up the topic of Bamsi, in which I must thank again the Honorable Member for Kalani, who was instilled in me and believed in me enough to give me that as my portfolio, to let you know that Bamsi is on the move. We're not overspending the government funds. Even though we have a lot to give account for, including the mail dorm again, like I say, I can't wait. I can't wait for the full, when you see June come and time for me to give my budget debate then. You can hear me preach then. And I would talk not only, let me give you a preview of this. Let me give you a preview. I will not only be speaking on that mail dorm and the insurance that was not in place. But then if you can ensure, see, that's why God is doing things in mysterious ways. Huh? Because if you had a building there that wasn't insured and it got burned down for whatever reason, then you find out later that none of the buildings were insured. Then you can understand where I'm coming from when June comes. So that is to be continued. Okay, since you want Bamsi to be talking about whatever it is and what transpired. And there's another little thing also. You could imagine, Mr. Speaker, you could imagine a contract that was signed for $5 million, $5 million plus. And then the same contract that was signed for $5 million plus. Turns out that the overage was over 180%. Like I say, to be continued. I say no more. So when you think we're going to be concentrating on marijuana, think again. We're going to be concentrating on the people and what is right for this country. See, Mr. Speaker, unlike me, I cannot say that I'm gonna stand here and I'm gonna bang on the bar and whatever it is being done and all that. I can't do that. I am grateful for this present administration. Because every time I stand in here, I could stand with joy and say how good it is to have a shower now without waiting 2 and 3 hours for water pressure to build up. As small as that may seem. I'm telling you, we got water, we got roads now that we could brag about. which in there saying that, oh, it was signed underneath the previous administration. I keep telling you, if ever it's the time that you want proof, there's proof. I always give credit where credit is due. I'm not going to oppose to anything. You have the Fresh Creek Bridge in Andrestown, the Stafford Creek Bridge that was done by a road contractor. And west from that going on to the back road, yes, that was done by the opposition. But let me tell you what the catch was. The catch was to come and scrape the road up 2 weeks before election in Mastic Point with nothing to try and fool our good people. They say that they had a contract signed. But then I could go home and I could hear people talk about, oh, that was done under the PLP government. This was done and that was done. But what I could say is that you have Mastic Point, north and south, with new water lines that were laid thanks to the good minister there, I'm sorry, the chairman, for WSC, throughout North and South Mastic Point, Kongstown, Nicholstown, Fire Road, Pineville, and when I said all of those settlements that I've just called. And now I can say that infrastructure in North Andros is really being upgraded under this administration. We have the London Creek Bridge that is now being installed and put in place. The culvert that is being put in there, the culvert that is being put in there. I gotta get this sermon together because I want people to understand this. See, the road in between there it is a lake on both sides. It was killing the environment. This administration saw it possible that we open that up so the water could flow from side to side freely with no problem. And not only that, for me to have more fish to eat. Not to catch it for me, but for me to catch it for myself, which is more better. That's what this administration is doing. There again, they want to give the credit to the other people. But you know what I like about it? The truth, it will be revealed. It's going to come out. I don't have to worry about that. You know, I guess they would talk again about the bridge that is going to be placed in the Standing Creek. That should be on its way very soon. You see, you got to understand. I could talk about this because I've gone through the pain of dealing with it for years. And as, like many others in North Andros right now can honestly say, that is much needed. And right now, in about 2 weeks or 3 weeks, we're going to be starting the construction of that new bridge in Standing Creek. That's progress. Well, you got to understand. That's what this is all about. I don't just fly there. I live there. You understand? Mr. Speaker, you know, I could go on and on, like I say, about the positive of what this administration have done. In the Berry Islands, my colleagues still talking to me, folks still rowing me, and the member for Kalani. You put more pressure on me because of the community center that now acts as a shelter, a hurricane shelter for those wonderful people in that constituency. After years of waiting for it, yes, it was something that was partnered with me with Royal Caribbean Cruise Lines. They come in here and they bring their people to the wonderful land. It's nothing wrong with them giving back. Nothing wrong. But it's now completed. Now we have an airport after so many years of the noise being making of how bad it's looking, how much of when the people come in, the first impression, what it's going to be in now that is under construction today. a new terminal being built. I'm not saying that there isn't more work to be done, but the wheels are moving in the right direction. As we move on now into another year, I look for more things to happen. We have a seawall that needs to be built in Stafford Creek, because on the bay there now, the water comes up to the people's home. Never happened before. Some say it's now global warming. But for whatever it is, that's a lot of water when the king tide come up. So we need to protect those areas with seawall. I look at our terminal that we need in San Andres also. Or I can even go on about the road in Red Base that I call pond holes instead of potholes for how big those holes are. But Red Base, I notice administration is not just administration of talks. Also the Berry Islands with the roads, not just talks. But I believe that this is going to be done because nothing else I can see but things being done. So I have no doubt in my mind that this wouldn't be done also. It's just a matter of time. But before I sit down, Mr. Speaker, because I'm not a long talker unless I have to, but I can wait for Joan to do that, because I can have a lot of a point of orders. So I can wait until then. I would like to thank the law enforcement, the great men and women out there that guard our borders. Sometimes we are at home and we're sleeping peacefully, not knowing what rough seas they're on, or the patrols that they're going on that can cost them their lives. Some of them never see their family. I can speak of that because I was there for at least 20 years. But most of all, I look at the customs officers. I know we always talk about our GDP and all that stuff, but when you look at what customs does, they collect more than 75% of the government revenue. 75%. And if you have concessions, or if you do the contingency orders, then you have to find ways in which you're going to collect money now because of the goods that are being imported. If they're duty-free, then what you can do? You have to find ways in which to get the funds. But those hard men and women out there still go forward and do what they have to do every day. And I just want to say thank you to them. I want to say thank you to the people of North Andres and the Berry Islands again for giving me the opportunity to come here and speak in this honorable place on their behalf, and to let them know that I will continue to be a voice in this place for them. And as long as I am here, I'm going to make sure that the people in this honorable place know exactly what I'm crying for. Again, I can just send a little word out there to say the seawalls. Mastic Point seawalls need to be done too. And talk about Red Bay's roads again, along with the Berry Islands Road. And I'm hoping the good member for Long Island could look at the water situation in the Berry Islands also, my brother. Whatever it is that can be done in those areas, I know that we would appreciate it. On that note, Mr. Speaker, I will take my seat. May God bless you and may God bless the Commonwealth of the Bahamas.
Thank you, Honorable Member. As many. The chair recognizes the Honorable Member for Golden Gates.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise on behalf of the wonderful people of the Golden Gates constituency, and I thank each of them for the honor and the privilege they have afforded me to represent their interest, their best interest, in this honorable chamber, and I thank Almighty God. Mr. Speaker, we are now just over halfway through this current term, and I want each resident in Golden Gate to know, as I said a moment ago, I thank each of them for the honor and the privilege to represent them. Those are not empty words or words we say when we speak in this chamber, Mr. Speaker, because that is what we do and say. No, sir, I want the people of Golden Gate's constituency to know that I count it as a singular honor and privilege. Mr. Speaker, perhaps I get some help, Mr. Speaker. Thank you. Thank you. As I was saying, Mr. Speaker, no, sir, I want the people of the Golden Gates constituency to know that I count it as a singular honor and privilege to have been afforded the opportunity by them to represent them in this place. Mr. Speaker, what is a privilege? Cambridge Dictionary defines it as an advantage that only one person or group of people has, usually because of their position or because they're rich. We, the members of this chamber, are all a part of an elected political group, and as a result, advantages accompany the membership, but it does not belong to us. It belongs to the constituents in all of our constituencies, sir. Mr. Speaker, the privilege and indeed the honor of being in this chamber belongs to constituents in every constituency, and they determine, at least every 5 years, whom they wish to serve them in this chamber. Being a member of this honorable chamber is not an entitlement. None of us have a right to be here. It is determined by the people of each constituency and them alone. The power resides with them. Mr. Speaker, as I said, I thank each Golden Gates constituent, recognizing and appreciating, as the good book tells us in the Gospel of Luke, chapter 17, verses 11 through 19. The famous parable when Jesus asked that famous question about the 10 lepers he healed. He asked, when the one returned, where are the other 9? That demonstrates how important it is for all of us to express gratitude and thankfulness, Mr. Speaker. The great Roman statesman, lawyer, scholar, writer, orator, Marcus Tullius Cicero said, and I quote, "Gratitude is not only the greatest of virtues, but the parent of all others." And Maya Angelou, the great African-American poet and author, stated, and I quote, "Let gratitude be the pillow upon which you kneel to say your nightly prayer." Today, I express my heartfelt gratitude. Mr. Speaker, I take this time to publicly offer heartfelt condolences to several Golden Gates constituency families on the passing of their loved ones, including Bishop Agnes Strawn's parents, Bishop Archelaus W. Cooper, Senior JP MBE, and Estella Louise Cooper, both of Cooperstown, her devoted husband, Clement A. Strawn, and the entire family, including Mr. Cephas Cooper, former island administrator. I note, sir, that my colleague, the honorable member for South and Central Andros, Pikesville Forbes, also attended the funeral, and so did the Right Honorable Hubert A. Ingram, former Prime Minister, and a son of Cooperstown, Abago. Mr. Speaker, Ms. Johnny E. Webb's mother, Ms. Linda Forbes, her father, John Webb Sr., and family. It is truly sad, as she died at the tender and early age of 30, with a bright future at work in her church, Golden Gates Native Baptist, being the youngest ever treasurer of the church, and involved in many youth organizations. She was an exemplar of service to all of her communities. Ms. Marjorie L. Edgecombe Davis's sons, Lionel Roll and Owen Davis, and daughter Susan Bryce and family. Evangelist Rosemary Butler Burke's daughter, Deborah Burke Darwell, nieces, nephews, and family. Finally, Mr. Speaker, Takisa Bethel's father, Jeffrey Bethel, and stepmother, Margaretta Bethel, children and family. I have known Jeffrey for many decades. He's a good friend. He served as council representative for the F&M Golden Gates Constituency Association for almost 15 years. and still today serves on the executive committee of our association. Takisa, too, left us too soon at a very early age of 38. Like Jonique, with so much promise and so much to contribute to our country. May their souls and the souls of the faithful departed rest eternal, and may perpetual light shine upon them. Mr. Speaker, we are facing a very serious health issue with cancer. The Honorable Minister spoke about this morning in his contribution. The Honorable Member for Elizabeth, in fact. I know that the Minister of Health and Honorable Member for Elizabeth, Dr. Dwayne Sands, and other healthcare professionals have spoken to this issue, sir. But, sir, it saddens me when most, by far, of the funerals I attend, which is most Saturdays, cause cancer in some form. I pray by God's grace that we as a people, in years to come, have far more success combating this deadly disease. Mr. Speaker, the year 2019, unfortunately, will long be remembered. It was perhaps a year like we've never seen, at least not in recent memory, sir. It was a year, same time last year, we could not imagine, fathom, or conceive that it would be our fate, but it was. We experienced the worst catastrophic, cataclysmic, and near apocalyptic disaster in the history of our young nation. That is Hurricane Dorian. Even today, over 5 months later, it is still difficult to wrap our minds around the sheer human toll and profound sense of loss, anxiety, and uncertainty, especially when we consider our brothers and sisters we have lost. Mr. Speaker, we as a nation and a people continue to keep the families who lost loved ones in our thoughts and prayers, as well for the families of our unaccounted brothers and sisters. So we cannot begin to imagine the untold grief Hurricane Dorian has caused them, and I suspect still today. We pray, sir, that the fond memories they shared will, by the grace of God, help to sustain them in this most difficult time. While the government, Mr. Speaker, while the government has no doubt been doing its level best, while the government, Mr. Speaker, no doubt has been doing its level best under most difficult circumstances, and indeed unprecedented circumstances, situations we have never dealt with before, through the Ministry of Disaster Management, Preparation and Reconstruction, a new ministry has been created to assist just for this purpose and for this time. Likewise, Mr. Speaker, also created is a Disaster Reconstruction Authority, which was created by this government in a most responsive, efficient, and effective way, bringing about much needed reconstruction relief to families in the affected areas. This minister-led Free National Movement government has been sparing no effort to restore the greatest degree of normalcy over the past 5 months. But there's no question that there's still a lot of work to be done in Grand Bahama, especially East Grand Bahama, Abaco, especially Marsh Harbor, Dundas Town, Murphytown, Central Pines, Treasure Key, and indeed the Keys on the whole. Mr. Speaker, naturally, the government is deeply concerned about rebuilding lives, restoring communities, and recreating economic opportunities as demonstrated by its recent announcements at the very earliest time in all of the impacted areas. Mr. Speaker, as the Honorable Member for Pinewood, His Excellency Reuben Raming, said so passionately, and perhaps His passion got the better of him last week. But he was right, and he is right. We are indeed one Bahamas. We are one Bahamas, Mr. Speaker. Yes, most of this in this chamber may live in New Providence, and others on other islands of this Commonwealth. But when the utter terror of the 200 miles per hour plus winds and the sea surge in excess of 20 feet ravaged our islands to the north, it created fear, worry, dread, anxiety, and uncertainty among our brothers and sisters on those islands indeed. We all felt, Mr. Speaker, we all felt it for them and with them.
Honorable members.
Mr. Speaker, we all felt it for them and with them.
Honorable member, just a moment. Mr. Technician, assist the honorable member, please. Assist them with some volume. Thank you. You may proceed.
Thank you. Yes, most of this in this chamber may live in New Providence and others on other islands of the Commonwealth. But when the utter terror of the 200 miles per hour plus winds and the sea surge in excess of 20 feet ravaged our islands to the north, created fear, worry, dread, anxiety, and uncertainty among our brothers and sisters on those islands. Indeed, we all of us, felt it for them and with them, exactly because we are one Bahamas, one people. Mr. Speaker, today, as our hearts goes out to our brothers and sisters, we feel for them and our minds are consumed by care and concern for them as they rebuild their lives, knowing and appreciating full well that is not by far an easy road. It's not an easy road for them, and we appreciate that. We understand that. Our hearts are with them, Mr. Speaker. And that is what the honorable member from Pinewood was saying last week. We're one Bahamas, one people. Mr. Speaker, I should say, though, we do so with a hopeful heart, mind, and soul, being expressed through the grace and mercy of God, that he will deliver our brothers and sisters. Sir, I am reminded of Psalm 27, verse 14, the last verse, and I quote, "Wait on the Lord, be of good courage, and he will strengthen thine heart. Wait, I say, on the Lord." Mr. Speaker, I take this time to recognize and applaud the staff of the Department of Social Services for the great work they have been doing non-stop for over 5 months, now and still to this day. Mr. Speaker, I now move to the specifics of this mid-year budget, which discussion has rightly been dominated by the effects of Hurricane Dorian. The Minister of Finance, thank you. The Minister of Finance, Deputy Prime Minister, and Honorable Member for East Grand Bahama, K. Peter Turnquest, reported to this Parliament, and I quote, "The damages and losses to infrastructure alone as a result of Hurricane Dorian is very tangible, and at over $450 million. That is the quote. That's what he told us here. 450 million. Infrastructure alone, Mr. Speaker. Nothing else. Everything everyone's concerned about. Roads, lights, water, all. 450 million. Right off the bat. Mr. Speaker, let me say that again, sir. Damage and losses to infrastructure alone as a result of Hurricane Dorian is just about close to $500 million. $500 million. That is infrastructure alone, sir. Almost $500 million. This government is serious about the task at hand, making a real assessment and getting the job done. While the other side was constantly talking about the looming increase in VAT. Mr. Speaker, that's what we heard. VAT is going to increase, VAT is going to increase. Mr. Speaker, guess what? The Minister of Finance could not be clearer when he stated, and I quote, "The government will not," and in the speech that he presented here, it's in caps, N-O-T, not be increasing taxes or even introducing any new taxes. That's what he said. That's what he told this Parliament. to cover the cost of Hurricane Dorian. Let me repeat that, sir. The government will not be increasing taxes or introducing any new taxes to cover the cost of Hurricane Dorian. Our people need to know. Make no mistake, in my view, that so-called looming VAT increase was pure, unadulterated, 100% PLP propaganda, sir. Actually, sir, a constituent, Mr. Speaker, a constituent came to my office about 2 weeks ago during my hours there every Thursday. I'm there from 6 p.m. I see everyone who comes. No appointment is needed. Every Thursday, sir. That lady had a great anxiety, Mr. Speaker. She was concerned about the cost of living, and she was concerned about this quote-unquote looming VAT increase. That's what they talked up. That's what they talked about. The F&M government's going to increase the VAT. That's what they were saying. Great anxiety about this looming or talked up and talked about supposed VAT increased by the PLP. That's what they did. Well, Mr. Speaker, that was simply wrong. They should not have done it. They caused great anxiety amongst people who they say already have a hard time meeting their bills. And they create more anxiety for those same people who have difficulty putting food on the table. Yes, sir. That's what they did. That's what they do. It's all about politics for them. But this government is not increasing taxes. Is not increasing the VAT. Made it very clear. Perhaps I go back and read it again. But it's very clear. Very, very clear. Let me repeat that, sir. The government will not be increasing taxes or introducing any new taxes to cover the cost of Dorian. We're not putting that on the backs of the Bahamian people. No, sir. We're not going to do that. Mr. Speaker, despite all the financial challenges that came about directly and flowed from Hurricane Dorian, due to the good fiscal management of this economy by this F&M government, the IMF still, after all that we've been dealing with, all that we will be dealing with, still projects, sir, about 1% increase in GDP for the current fiscal year. That's what we were told. An Honorable Minister of Finance. In spite of everything, Mr. Speaker, this government, this economy, according to the IMF, is still projected to grow. Mr. Speaker? And this current year ends June 30th. And remember now, Dorian was September 1st. It's in the same fiscal year. June 30th to June 30th. It's in the same fiscal year, Mr. Speaker. And in spite of it all, the IMF said, we fully project that the Bahamas economy will grow almost 1%, Mr. Speaker. That's good fiscal management by this F&M government led by Dr. Hubert Alexander Minnis. Mr. Speaker, imagine all that has happened and all we need to do, we are still projected to grow 1%. Mr. Speaker, we could not ask or wish for better news. Mr. Speaker, because most experts agree that what we really need is economic growth. And I'm sure the Honorable Member for Exumas and Ragged Island would agree that the one thing we do need is economic growth. Something we did not see, we did not feel, nor did we experience under the PLP government from 2012 to 2017. Didn't feel it, didn't see it, didn't experience it. Thank you, Southern Senator Andrews. Yeah, that's what you say when you didn't perform the last 5 years.
Honorable member, the chair recognizes honorable member for Mango Fee, Southern Central Andrews.
I ordinarily, as a senior man, I would not have been a junior member would make such strong commentary. But he would note the fact that just today, the honorable member for Freetown has only been permitted in this fair land to be the $7 million man because of the efforts of the previous administration with what would have happened, especially in the Western District. So at the end of the day, I want
Honorable member,
I want
are you on a point of order?
be guided in his commentary going forward. I'm saying, give some credit. Give some credit.
Chair recognizes the honorable member for Fox Hill on a point of order.
Mr. Speaker, when the learned elder provokes the young pop, the learned elder should expect that the young pop would nip. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, you know, Mr. Speaker, frankly, I would be obliged. I'd be obliged, you know. I'd be obliged to use more precise language if the member so desired. And so let me put it this way for the member, and I'm sure you'd prefer this, right? For the whole previous 5 years, there was no GDP growth. There was none. There was none. We all know that. There was none. And here we are after the worst, catastrophic, cataclysmic, worst hurricane, mess up that word, but worst hurricane, right? We are gonna grow at least 1%. At least 1%. At least 1%. We're gonna grow that at least 1%. They had an economy for 5 years and didn't grow any year at any time. And most years it was negative. It was below zero. There was retraction in the economy. We lost jobs. We lost businesses. That is what they left. And that is what we feel and experience. And let's not forget, blacklisted, we said, downgraded for 5 years almost. That is, as I tell you, I certainly oblige the member. I'll oblige the member. I'll oblige the member.
Chair recognizes the honorable member for Mango Key, South and Central Andres.
There was something where what the old people used to say is best for the younger children to sometimes listen and to speak when they're spoken to. The member for the junior member for Golden Gates is putting on me, but I'm telling him at the end of the day, talking about what didn't happen in the previous 5 years. Don't forget now we have a debt among some $3 billion would have been borrowed, and we still can't feel, touch, or anything at this time. So at the end of the day, you must realize that what goes around also comes around. We are continuing to watch. $3 billion. That's all I'm saying to you, my friend. Nothing we can touch or feel after $3 billion would have been borrowed.
I thank the honorable member. I thank the honorable member because, Mr. Speaker, he makes a very good point. He makes a very good point, Mr. Speaker. We hear from them often, Mr. Speaker, and the Bain people need to know this and be aware. That's what they like to say. Forget about the last 5 years. We don't want you to remember the last 5 years because we need to try to win in 2022. And that ain't gonna help us if you remember the last 5 years. That's what he just said. They don't want to hear about the last 5 years. They don't want to hear that, Mr. Speaker. They don't want to hear that. They don't ever want to hear that. No, I don't blame them. I don't blame them. I don't blame them. I don't blame them. But you see, Mr. Speaker, and again, he said we should talk about going forward. And that's precisely what I just said, Mr. Speaker. The IMF says, now, in this same fiscal year, we're going to grow 1%, Mr. Speaker. So I'm with him. I agree with him entirely. I agree with him entirely. Thank you. Honorable member for South and Central Andres, thank you very much. You're so kind. You're so kind. Mr. Speaker, I commend. Mr. Speaker, I commend this government, this minister-led Free National Movement government, for the job it is doing under most difficult circumstances. You know, as bad as poorly as they did not have a Dorian. They did not. They did as poorly as they did without a Dorian, Mr. Speaker. Just real talk, Mr. Speaker. Just real talk. These are the facts. No question. But they'll come here and talk this other stuff. That was not of this administration's doing, Mr. Speaker. It was not. Dorian, Mr. Speaker, lest some forget, was a natural disaster. The Free National Movement government, led by the Honorable
Honorable
Stand in a
members.
minute. The Free National Movement, Mr. Speaker, thank you, by the way. The Free National Movement, government led by Dr. the Honorable, Most Honorable Hubert Alexander Minnis, did not visit this situation on the Bahamas and the Bahamian people. As I said, lest some forget, Mr. Speaker, this was a natural disaster. This was forced upon this administration, and this administration has put its shoulders to the wheel, as others have said earlier, and they've made the decision that had to be made. They may not always get it right. We might not always get it right, but it will be there. We'll take full consideration of everything and all the facts and make the best decision in all the circumstances at all times for the Bahamian people. That's what this government has been doing. Mr. Speaker, I said in the budget debate last June, I was over there with my placard, I put it up, and I talked about a quote from former President Barack Obama. And that quote from President Barack Obama, if you might recall, Mr. Speaker, it talked about being on the right track. Well, Mr. Speaker, we are still, today, in spite of everything, we are still on the right track, by the grace of God. Golden Gates support the budget, and may God continue to bless Golden Gates and the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, honorable member. As many. The chair recognizes the honorable member for Southern Shores.
I reserve a spot for
Golden House, Wednesday.
Chair recognizes the honorable member for Bamboo Town.
Mr. Speaker, I do now move that the House suspends until Wednesday, the 19th of February, 2020, at 10 a.m. Mr. Chair, I second.
Honorable members, it has been moved and seconded that the business of this House suspend until Wednesday at 10 a.m., the 19th of February 2020. As many as are in favor will remain seated. Those who oppose would stand. The business of this House stands suspended until 10 a.m., Wednesday, the 19th of February 2020.